We could have just quit and said, fuck this. I'm tired of people giving me the finger and, just, but it was more like, no, this is just interesting. It's actually interesting that this community doesn't want to be famous. And that's a theme that I've always been interested in is like the price of fame
Uh-huh.
because our culture is just, I mean, it's just so obviously 100% like fame is good, success is good, money is good. And here was an entire community saying, not necessarily.
Welcome to The Creative Asylum, a weekly podcast that digs deep into the minds of visionary creators of all stripes. Musicians, actors, filmmakers, writers, artists, cartoonists, and cultural disruptors. Here, we'll discuss perspectives of living life on your own terms. Life lessons that keep us grounded and sane, and sometimes pull us back from the edge. So, take a deep breath, loosen your grip on the bland and the boring. This is your weekly prescription for authentic living, creative clarity, and hopefully, a little bit of cultural rebellion.
Side effects may include spontaneous joy, existential epiphanies, and an uncontrollable urge to do weird and beautiful things.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in to The Creative Asylum. I'm Daniel House, your host, and today's guest is Doug Prey, old friend and documentary filmmaker. First film I was ever in was a little documentary called Hype about the Seattle music scene. That was also Doug's first film. It was almost 30 years ago. He's been making films ever since. He's made various films on all sorts of subjects, including art and copy. One of my personal favorites, Surfwise, Scratch, which is all about turntable culture, which is going to be 25 years old next year. Amazing. More recently, he did the documentary for HBO called Love, Lizzo, about Lizzo. And there's a 6-part series on HBO and also on TCM. If you're a fan of documentaries about film, you should watch the 6-part series, The Power of Film, with Howard Suber, professor emeritus at UCLA, basically taking you into the classroom and talking about one of my favorite things, which is the art of film. This is a great conversation with Doug. I hope you tune in, and I hope you stick around for the whole thing. Thanks again. Here we go. Here's Doug. Hey, Doug. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Excellent. I'm okay. But I guess for the people watching, and, I'll just mention I appear to once again be out of focus, which has been driving me nuts. And I don't know what to do about it. But, if I'm talking to a film person, I should be sharp and in focus as can be, right? I don't know what to do about it.
And well lit. At least
And
you're
well lit.
fairly well lit. Yeah.
Yeah, so is my back wall, which is nice and crisp, right?
Yeah. We're both overly lit. This is a
Okay.
nice cinematic, shadowy lighting.
Right. Well, let's talk cinema, because I'm really excited that you've agreed to be on the Creative Asylum.
Glad to be here.
And I followed your films. I think I've watched most all of them, if not all of them, over the last, almost 30 years. And of course, the obvious starting place, I suppose, is the fact that I was actually one of the subjects, however brief, in your very, very first documentary, which was the film Hype, which is about the Seattle music scene. And so I want to just take a step further back, because I'm curious about what initially inspired you in the first place to want to go to film school. And then I'm curious what it was that inspired you to make that particular film as your first film after having graduated film school.
So it seems like a long time ago, but in some ways it seems like just yesterday. But I went to college during a time when there were no film classes or anything like that. I went to Colorado College and studied sociology, and I just was like really into art, really into music. I was one of these kind of like jack of all trades. Like I'm musical, but I'm not like great enough to have like had a career in music. I'm artistic, but I definitely wouldn't have become like a famous painter or anything. I'm really into like theater and really into, I don't know, just social trends. I think I was a sociology major because I kind of loved movements. I'm one of these guys who's had older siblings. So I was kind of like, I was definitely the baby of the family. I had 3 older brothers and I was always just fascinated with all the stuff they were into. They were like much older. I was the way baby in the family.
Were you the unexpected baby?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Like 4 boys, and I had 3 older brothers, and and they were, I mean, we didn't compete because they were so much older, but I just, they kind of dragged me through the late 60s and the early 70s. So I kind of saw all these trends and I saw how music shifted. And I was just always into I was always into like subcultures. And then when I had my own kind of coming of age in college, like I'm sure you did, and whatever that age group was, whether you go to college or not, there's this moment in life where you suddenly identify with a type of music. It was like 1979, 80, 81, 82, and I just totally got into the whole punk rock, new wave, whatever that was. It just felt so different and energetic. And I was like, oh my God, this is me. This is like, it just meant so much at the time. And I say that just because it showed me what it's like to love music and to get lost in collecting and singles. And my friends were much more adept than I was, but I was so along for the ride. I was so into it, like just the culture of it. You may know Jim Sangster. He and I
Yeah.
had a radio show in college.
I did not know that.
Yeah, we had a radio show. Like, I mean, it was just fun, wacky, crazy, like just playing whatever we wanted, like at 2 a.m. kind of thing. But yeah, it was called Rev Up with Doug and Jim, and then we had another one called Camp Out with Doug and Jim. But the point was, we were just aggressively into like, did you get that latest single? And running down to the store and like getting the single and like, holding it in front of somebody, and then they chase you because they got to hear it first. And that kind of affection for subculture, underground culture, music, all that stuff, it just felt really real. It was really fun. Honestly, I just absolutely loved it. And I had a musical background. My mom was a music teacher and a choir director and sang in her choirs, and she was, piano teacher. I had to take piano. I studied violin for most of my life. So music was in my
Right.
it was in my background. It was kind of required. That was a requirement of my growing up with my mom. My dad was a scientist. He was a professor. So I was kind of a professor's kid in Madison, Wisconsin. But long story short, all I'm really trying to get back to is your initial question. And I just kind of loved everything. I was really into all this stuff. And suddenly one day it just dawned on me like, oh my God, film combines everything I'm into. It's just everything. It's got meaning and intent. It has form that I think is fascinating. I was very moved by a few films that I had watched in college, but I didn't grow up with movies at all, like at all.
Really?
How every filmmaker is always like, well, my mom brought me to the matinees every single set. I'm so not that. I don't think my mom ever brought me to a movie. Maybe Planet of the Apes.
That's
Maybe
wild.
when I was like 6. I think I saw that or something.
My story is all about film. And in
Are
fact,
you kidding? Really?
oh yeah. I grew up with both of my parents. I mean, they weren't together, but I saw so many films early
Really?
on. Yeah, in the 60s, in the 70s, and even my grandma, like when I was 12, my grandma took me to see Cabaret, which is arguably inappropriate for a 12-year-old, but
Mind blowing.
but she knew how obsessed I was with film already.
Yeah.
In fact, that's like one of my handful of regrets that I have in life. And I don't know if it's a regret, but it's a what if question,
Mm-hmm.
because there's two things that I've always had a lifelong fascination towards that I never pursued. And number one is film school. I really wonder what if I had actually gone to film school. And the other one is architecture school. But I think film is more of an abiding passion for me. Even today, I watch over 300 movies a year, if you can believe that.
I just so don't at all. To this day, I don't watch movies. It's
That's
so
wild.
weird.
Because you make them.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I'm sure there's musicians. I'm sure musicians who don't listen. Like, so yeah, I was in all that stuff, and I took a film class between my junior and senior year in college in Chicago, and just loved it. I had a Bolex camera. I learned how to shoot 16 millimeter, and just started making really crappy, weird, stupid, I guess whatever punk rock type weird little movies with my friends, which is what it always starts as. And then slowly just kind of kept going. Then I got into UCLA Film School. Well, I won't go into that whole story, but I was rejected, and then they accepted me later. And I ended up going to UCLA in the producers program there, the graduate school. And while I was doing that, my connection to the Seattle music scene really is just one of just friends, just pure friends and connections. Is really because the Young Fresh Fellows, half of the Young Fresh Fellows were in a band, Tad Hutchison and Jim Sangster very good friends of mine in college, and they played in a band called Fun at the Zoo, which was a totally whacked out, amazing power pop, kind of they were like power pop. They were just great. And then next thing I knew, I was like, holy shit, they're in Seattle recording records. Like, how does that work in 1983, or 84? And so around that time, so, just kind of was excited about what they were doing. Later on down, by the time I was in film school, which was like the very end of the 80s and the first year or two of the 90s, stuff was happening in Seattle, and I was kind of like fascinated by that. Like Jim and some other friends up there kept saying, dude, there's this thing happening here.
Something's happening.
Something's in the air. And I was friends with, again, through the Pop Llama sort of, as you know, the Seattle music scene has different fiefdoms, and everybody's pretty friendly, but it's like different. Like, oh, CZ Records, and oh, over here's Estrus Records, and over here's all the people from Pop Llama, and over here's all that, Sub Pop, of course, and all that. And so I was really close with the Pop Llama crowd. I love the Fastbacks. I was a big fan of theirs early on, and and so that led to like, Rusty Willoughby and like Flop. And so I did some music videos for Flop. I did some videos for the Fellows.
This is prior to Hype?
Yeah, this is before Hype. I'm getting to your question of like,
yeah, no, it's fine. I'm learning stuff, so this is really
so
cool.
like, and so it wasn't like I was like, nobody in the scene knew me except for my friends, but it was, I knew just enough people that there was a somewhat of a degree of trust, or at least they kind of knew me, or, I mean, that it's such a community. But at the same time, I was finishing film school, and one of the things about graduate film school, if you study directing or something, is you get out of there, and the assumption, especially at UCLA, was that you are a filmmaker. You're gonna make a film now. Like, you're just gonna. And it could have been a scripted thing, but I had a hell of a time trying to write scripts. I just can't make shit up. I really can't. And I was drawn to documentary filmmaking. And I had worked for a documentary filmmaker in the mid 80s in San Francisco as well, which I won't go into all that either. Too much history. But anyway, so by the time I graduated, I think I had a year of thinking that I was the next Francis Ford Coppola, and realizing I absolutely was not, and couldn't write a page of a script. I was like, Jesus Christ, this is hard, man. I was like doing odd jobs, and all around the same time, the Seattle music scene is just exploding. It's 92. I got a lot of this shit from people just like, well, dude, if you're going to do this movie, you better start it in the mid 80s or early 80s. And I was like, I know. But who else is doing this? And are they doing it right? And can they tell a good story? And so I had just enough arrogance coming out of film school that I thought maybe we could do this. And I'm sure you may or may not remember my partner, Steve Helby. He was the producer of Hype. He was just one of these guys who was just like, the more they don't want us to make this movie, the more fascinating it becomes.
Okay.
In a story way, not in an asshole way of like, oh, they don't want us to do this, well, screw them. It wasn't that at all. It was more like, God, this scene is really not into the cameras and not into the hype. They're not liking this whole grunge label that's going around the world. And he had the wisdom to just keep pushing me, because I was telling him, Steve, this is the worst fucking idea. We can't do this movie. This is terrible. Nobody wants cameras up here. They're sick of it. It's already blown up already.
That's the key, is that we were sick of it. And actually, I mean, that's
Totally.
one of my favorite things about Hype, because I remember that period pretty vividly. Like, by the time you guys came up to, hey, we're going to shoot a music documentary of your scene, we had already been overrun with like everybody for 2, if not 3 years. And we were over it. Like, every major label had kind of come in, and actually reflecting back to one of my favorite scenes in Hype, where Steve Fisk is talking about Baby Huey as a record label, where he comes in, waddles in, signs a couple of bands, and then, sits down and kills a few. And I remember when you guys came in, the amount of distrust for you people from LA, and also Seattle had this thing about LA too, like fuck LA
for sure. For sure.
So everybody believed that you were going to come in and just do this really lame, shitty corporate kind of take on the whole thing. And what I always found was amazing is how you guys slowly gained the trust of everybody in the scene. And once you started shooting people and doing interviews, people started talking, and like, these guys seem okay, and these guys seem to be asking the right questions, and these guys seem to be including the right bands, and
Yeah.
and in the end, the thing about hype, and I think anybody in that film and anybody that was there at the time that has seen the film will say that you nailed it. Like, you kind of captured the essence of what it felt like. And that was a real amazing thing from somebody who was an outsider.
Mhm. First of all, thank you. I take that. I'm honored to hear that. I just feel there was a couple things that made that so. One is patience, because that first year of trying to make hype was just misery. I mean, I loved interviewing you. I loved shooting, the bands that you had suggested we film from CZ. I mean, basically, for anyone listening, we kind of went to all the indie labels and really wanted to be representative. I mean, we knew it had to be a community-based film. We knew if we just went after, no, it's only about Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains and Nirvana, Soundgarden, like the four big. We knew that that is the movie that you guys were all expecting us to make. I knew it wasn't for the money. It was like, really, I just wanted to make a cool film. And I knew how sick everybody already was of the media and the cameras. And even
Yes.
Cameron Crowe's singles, that was sort of the maximum amount of exposure to this concept of grunge or the scene or how sort of hip it was supposed to be. And I'm not putting down that movie. I'm just saying it had been maximum exposure. And
Yeah.
we could have just quit and said, fuck this. I'm tired of people giving me the finger and, but it was more like, no, this is just interesting. It's actually interesting that this community doesn't want to be famous. And that's a theme that I've always been interested in, is like the price of fame, because our culture is just, it's just so obviously 100% like fame is good, success is good, money is good. And here was an entire community saying, not necessarily. Yeah, we all want to make it. We want those hits. Believe me, nobody was saying they didn't want hits. But there was this whole thing, this other context of like, yeah, but there's a price to pay. We liked it better before. That was the other thing.
Yes.
And so because I had kind of caught a whiff of what it was like before, I also had that sense of it. And again, I'm not trying to make it sound like I was super smart. It was just kind of like these realizations. There was a lot of humor in Seattle.
Oh, yeah.
But the image portrayed was just like this dark, brooding, like, we're just like heavy. And it's like, actually, even that music kind of had a humor behind it.
It's very snarky humor, too.
It's very what?
Snarky.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
very,
you were there at the dawn of like,
it's very irreverent,
Deep
right?
Six. So I kind of enjoyed it, and I just and I really. And then the second thing I'll say, and I think I've done this. I've tried to do this in all my documentaries, is just let people say it for themselves, and then
Sure.
my job is to package what they've said that seems truthful. It's not for me to go like, well, they're saying this, and here's what I think. Does that make sense? Like, in other words, your words were your words. And I didn't, there weren't a lot of people came back and said, you took me out of context and that's not what I meant. It was like, I just let people say what they wanted to say.
But there's also an art, I think, too. I mean, not that I've ever made a documentary film, but I have thought about it.
We've done a lot of interviews.
Yeah. And it's sort of in the same general realm. I think there's a real art to knowing how to conduct an interview. And I think the key is it probably shouldn't be an interview as much as it should be a conversation, which is what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah.
I have no questions prepared
Mm-hmm.
because what I want to do is have a conversation. Then everything's open-ended and people could just talk about what is truest and most authentic to whatever their experience is. Yeah. And really whatever your film is going to be about, right?
Yeah, I think as my career developed, and I've made many docs now, the things I learned the hardest way on hype have become the truest lessons. And one of them is just listen. Like, it's hard when you're young and green, and it was my first film,
Yeah.
And it's hard you're just so nervous about how you're coming across. And the art of getting out of your head and just listening to the other person, letting them speak. And actually, because the more you listen, then the better your follow-up question is. It's like, if you're really listening, it's like, oh, I never thought about that. Wait, what are you saying? And then all of a sudden it becomes a really interesting interview instead of just like, I always joke when I do teach sometimes in doc class, I'll just get up there and I go, here's what most interviews are like when you're young and new. Question number 4, how did you do? Okay, thank you. Question, never even looking up from the page practically. And it's like, no, there's this human being over there and they're dying to give you something. But that was a hard lesson. I was really nervous. In fact, Jonathan Gold, he's
I sure know that name.
he's food. He's
Yes,
really
yes,
well known
yes.
for being a foodie.
Yes.
He passed away tragically
A few years ago, right?
about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But just an amazing guy. And what few people know is he's one of the best food writers ever. He was one of the first to win a Pulitzer, I think, for food writing, if I have that right.
Right. Yeah.
But he was a rock and roll writer. And he was just a really good like a critic, like he'd review shows and stuff. And I remember thinking, like, I don't know this guy, but he's like the best writer I know. And I brought him up in that first round of interviews.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know, he might have even been in the room when we interviewed you, or might have been the second round. But we brought Jonathan up to just help out just because I was so green.
Yeah.
And so he helped with the interviews. I mean, he'd be sitting there. Sometimes he'd ask questions, but I'd still be the director. So that was really cool. And the first thing I said, and the last thing I will say about why it may have worked, is this idea of just patience. Because if we'd gone up there for 2 weeks and just blown out of town and we're like trying to, it's not the same thing. And I lived up there with my wife and I had a 1-year-old and I was like, we were like struggling. I think there was something about like, people started feeling sorry for me. Like, there was that guy at the end of the bar. He's still trying to do that fucking stupid documentary. Oh my God. But it was also this idea more than that we had filmed bands who weren't a part of the hype that was happening. That like we were filming the Gits. Before they became also known for the tragic story. But as an example, we were filming Hammerbox. We were filming all, 7-Year Bitch when they were really quite new. We were filming bands from Estrus and Bellingham. We were filming a couple Portland bands that could have done more. And there's some bands we'll always regret not including, but it was definitely like, oh shit, these guys they filmed Gashuffer, but they filmed them with 3 cameras, 16 millimeter film and killer digital sound. And and those tapes got around. So we made a little promo. You probably saw it too. It was like a 20-minute promo with a lot of those performances as a way to try to, because we didn't have any attention from the larger, better known bands at the time.
Right.
And it was a way of showing just kind of like sincerity and like, look, we've already spent like $80,000 filming bands who a lot of people haven't heard about. And it was it wasn't a gimmick. It sounds like a strategy, like, oh, that's how we're going to do it. It was just how it happened, and we ran out of money, and then we really needed to get more investors, and we really did need to get Pearl Jam and Nirvana. We absolutely did. They were a part of the story. It wasn't like I didn't want them, but it was for a whole year and a half. They weren't the
focal point of the story.
Yeah,
I think that's the key. Obviously still relevant to that scene at a time when the scene had already exploded, basically. Yeah. But there was still all this other stuff going on.
So it really was a great experience. I look back on it so fondly, and I always owe my friends and Pete Vogt, who is a producer, and Lisa Dutton, and the core group of people who I worked closely with to make that film. I'll be indebted to them for life because it was my first film and it kind of worked. I mean, we went to Sundance. It kicked off my entire career. It really was like, I'll always have this huge spot in my heart for Seattle because it was like, whenever somebody says they're from Seattle, I'm like, I know that city pretty well. And I'm really proud of that. I never lived there except for that year.
Well, but that's significant. And I think during the course of that year, like I mentioned before, people stopped rejecting you and they welcomed you
eventually. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I think you became part of the community and people realized you weren't trying to sort of, squeeze more juice out of the lemon, so to speak. Yeah. So your next film was, you mentioned earlier that, subcultures fascinate you as they do me. And it's probably why I'm a genuine fan of your movies. After Hype, you did Scratch, which is a very similar kind of movie about an absolutely and completely different subculture. And then a few years after that, you did Infamy, which I only just recently discovered. I don't know how that missed my radar, but so Scratch is about turntable culture and Infamy is about graffiti culture. In my mind, these films kind of live in the same broad scope of creative rebelliousness, of subculture. They all kind of look into these subcultures that have attitudes of independence, of defiance, perhaps.
Yeah.
How did you make the decisions to then Scratch and then similarly later Infamy?
One thing that's run through my whole career is I have rarely come up with any ideas for the films I've made. And I mean that seriously. It's not a self-deprecating. I don't sit around and go, "Oh, it'd be a cool doc. Let's make that," and then go get the money. It's usually a producer. Even Hype was Steve Helvey's idea, because he realized I had connections in Seattle. He was like, "Wait a minute, put two and two together. Like, let's
Okay.
get Doug to do." But like Scratch came same way. Like a couple producers, Brad Blondheim and Ernest Meza, approached me, and they just said like, "Hey man, we love your film Hype." I mean, because
Mhm.
one thing begets another.
Yeah.
They were big fans of Hype. I think they'd seen it at Sundance even, and they wanted to do this film about hip hop DJs. And it was just like with Steve. I was like, "Steve, this is a bad." I was like, "You guys, I'm really not like Mr. Hip Hop at all.
Right.
I don't understand it. I don't really listen to it. My learning curve is going to be massive if you continue down this path trying to get me to direct this. I think I'm the wrong person, but it's cool and I'm
Interesting.
flattered. I appreciate it." And then sure enough, they like introduced me to Mix Master Mike and I hung out with him for a night. They had given me some really cool records that and I like jazz. Like, remember, I'm into all kinds of music. I wasn't just like only into alternative rock
Sure.
or whatever you want to call was happening in Seattle. I wasn't into hip hop, honestly. I
Okay.
was not a hip hop head, but I did like jazz and I liked lots of other forms of music. And for some reason, I just realized, like meeting Mixmaster Mike that night, he just spun it for me in a way that just blew my mind. He was just like, "This is what's going on."
Hmm.
Like, and it basically struck me that it's not that different from Hype of like the old days were better. Cause like, no, like I didn't realize the genesis of hip hop really started with the DJ. I just didn't. I was that naive. Like I didn't realize like how much DJs kind of like invented hip hop. That really like Cool Herc was a DJ. He wasn't
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
rapper, like, and it's just like, all that. I don't want to get into that whole history, but it was just I just suddenly saw that. And then the second parallel was I said, "Oh my God, this is like the most free and creative music these guys are making with turntables." And I was a total outsider, but utterly fascinated, totally curious, and loving what they were doing suddenly, realizing it was jazz. It was like the way they were cutting shit together was just, I really did honestly get into it. I was just like, okay, this is mind blowing, not just for me, because I'm starting to understand hip hop and beats.
Right.
And there was a few other things I had edited. I'd done an editing job for Alan and Albert Hughes in Los Angeles. They were with this company called Underworld Entertainment. And the Hughes brothers were like, at that time, well, they still are A-list, like really great directors. They had made Menace to Society when they were like 19, and they wanted to do a doc. And so I ended up editing this crazy documentary called American Pimp, which is
Which is another
definitely for.
film I absolutely love.
Oh, you've seen it? Wow, man.
I have it.
A lot of people haven't
No,
seen that one, but like
I have it.
the music in American Pimp is
Yeah.
nothing but these breaks and these like 70s funk, soul, like stuff that would be in pimp movies, like blaxploitation movies,
Yeah.
and not, but also just a lot of really cool stuff like Roy Ayers and, just, I mean, on and on, like just cool, amazing music. And so I had to, like, it was like everything sort of connects. Like I had heard like all this music for like 2 years editing that film. And then I got approached to do Scratch. And so it was kind of like, well, I know these breaks. So it
Hmm.
wasn't like
Hmm.
like I was an outsider, but it was kind of like I had been trained without knowing it in like
Sure.
the sounds of what these guys were working with to create hip hop.
How is it that they found you to edit their film?
Kevin Messick, who went on, he's a huge producer. He had gone to UCLA Film School with me, and he was at that time the president of Underworld Entertainment, and just
Okay.
said, "Well, I know this guy Doug, and you should check out his film Hype." And and Scratch was another exploration. I was still an outsider, but by then I'd been an outsider in the Seattle music scene. I kind of wasn't afraid of that idea.
And you directed and shot
I
and
directed,
edited?
and that one I edited because by the time we were ready to start editing, I was so into this idea of like decontextualizing
Hmm.
images, and like I started realizing with nonlinear editing, you're basically DJing footage.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
basically you can say VJing, but and I was just like, oh shit, I can make the film go backwards if I want, or I can like
Right.
cut it up. I can have like a scene where you go tick 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 tick. You can cut it, or
Yeah.
I can cut to the beat. There's nothing better than editing hip hop. I don't care
But
how great rock and roll is,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. That makes
there's
perfect
nothing
sense.
better.
But I also think, I mean, you have a deep, abiding affinity towards music broadly, jazz and other things, but also just are musical, as you mentioned. I think that being musical is kind of a critical quality to be a really good editor, because I think
I
editing,
agree.
I think the process of editing is innately kind of musical in terms of just sensibility. Like
Yeah.
had I gone to film school, I probably would have ended up being an editor. I bet you.
It's
Because
so interesting.
when I watch films, I'm always acutely aware of editing. And when I watch documentaries, I'm especially appreciative of editing that is done in a way that you forget that there's somebody behind the camera, And
Yeah.
I think your films really succeed in that way.
Editing is music. It really is. And it's all about rhythm.
Yeah,
And for
exactly.
documentaries, you're basically, when you think of a DJ staring at like 2,000 records in their basement and going, well, I'm going to make a night of entertainment. I'm going to entertain for 90 minutes.
Right.
It's not that different than when we sit down in an editing room with, okay, shit, we got like 400 hours of interviews and footage of trees blowing in the wind and like, like whatever your footage is. And you have total freedom to design this experience, which is different from a scripted, which I
Yes.
love scripted movies, but it's so different because you're just like, you can basically make any movie you want at that time with the
Right.
material, within the limits of the material. So that was something I just really related to with those guys. And this was at the height of sort of the bling gangster rap, like, and the DJs who, these turntablists were, I hate using this word, but they were like alternative. They were kind of like, no, we're underground hip hop. We're bringing it back. We're
Right.
bringing hip hop back to its roots. And that was no different than kind of the sentiments seen in hype. It
Uh-huh.
was the same kind of, it was better in the golden days. Like, let's get back to what this meant, not to what it's become.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought that those two together are just such perfect complements to each other. They're like I
Yeah.
think there's just real similar kind of attitudes between the
Yeah.
two.
They
You
also
know.
both were filmed by Rob Bennett, who
Hmm.
died tragically in 2004, who was the cinematographer for both Hype and Scratch. And he just had, you're talking about music, like for editors, well, he had a musical way with a camera. Like there was nobody better on a stage or with a DJ or with a guitar soloist. God, it comes back to what I just said. He listens. And my
Uh-huh.
favorite cinematographers are listening. They know, here comes the chorus, here comes the chorus. I'm going to pan the camera right now. They're
Right.
not just like shooting. Oh, that's a nice shot. Oh, shit. Oh, this guy's singing now. It's like they know, they feel the stage and they feel
Hmm.
whatever it is. And Rob, man, I miss him so much, but he, like a lot of people in the Seattle music scene, he died of a very tragic drug overdose
Been a
in
lot of
2004. And he was one of my best friends and
oh,
really a big, big moment in my life. But he shot my first two features.
I'm sorry to hear he passed. That sucks. Do you think Scratch will ever come out on Blu-ray?
It's funny that Brad has been in touch with me about wanting to do like God, would it be the 30th? Wait a minute. No, 2001. Come on, Doug.
2001.
No, you do know math.
Six more years.
25th. We'll do the
No, wait.
25th anniversary. No, he's been seriously talking about wanting to re-release it for the 25th anniversary, which would be really cool. I don't know
I
if
think you
we'll be able
should.
to, make that happen, but it'd be kind of cool.
I think it'd be fantastic. If you're enjoying this conversation, please make sure you hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. It's the quickest way to grow our channel, and it's absolutely free. You can also subscribe to our other channels on social media. Check out our Instagram at Creative Asylum CA, that's the letter CA, or on TikTok at The Creative Asylum, that's all one word. Our website is thecapod.com, and our Facebook profile is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. All right, back to the episode. So what about Infamy? Infamy is kind of, it's still subculture, but it's not music.
Well, it had two things in common. Subculture, people feeling misunderstood, which is true of all three films. Like kind of like, not in a psychological way, but just generally, oh, people don't understand this shit at all. People don't understand what we do. And nothing is less understandable to the average American than graffiti. I mean, like real graffiti. I'm not talking about pretty murals on the college campus. I'm talking about, you just saw the film recently, you said.
Mhm.
So, it's hardcore. It's hardcore illegal bombing graffiti. And that was just yet another situation. I can't remember how Kevin Lewis, the producer, approached me, was a fan of Scratch, had seen Hype. And
Okay.
so, everything begets
So,
everything else.
yeah,
The thing about Scratch is it opened up the world of hip hop culture, which of
right.
course graffiti is a huge, huge part of. I
Yes.
mean, it's one of the four elements. And so it kind of seemed natural. And yet again, I didn't know anything about graffiti except I knew what I liked and I knew what I hated. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
I hated tagging. And I mean, I was just like a typical person going like, why the fuck would somebody do that? And
Right.
why don't they
Even,
write
even,
something political instead of their name? What's up with their
even,
name?
even, even watching the film, even having a better understanding, I still had the same reaction. I'm like, tagging's fucking ugly, but those murals are absolutely stunning.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
like
so
I
true.
wish more cities had like art councils that would have funds for graffiti artists to do planned murals. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No,
But
totally. I mean, yeah, tagging is still very ugly, but at least understanding it, I then, for the rest of my life, when I look at it, I
mhm.
understand what's going on here. Oh,
Right.
that's gang graffiti, and I know what they're saying. And this is like a tag, and that guy's well known, and this tag over here is like someone stupid. Like you can, you can.
Yeah.
It's like a little hieroglyphics. You can start understanding what they all mean. But anyway, it was the same thing, and I have to say again, like it's never me. I'm never the genius who knows these cultures. There's always somebody who knows a lot more than I, who is the
Hmm.
the Rosetta Stone into the culture. So in the case of Hype, I already mentioned some names, but they were really good advisors. They're
Hmm.
really good advisors. And by the time I knew you and people like Charles Peterson and had met the guys in Mudhoney, and I mean then everybody was able to be an advisor.
Right.
But
Right.
back to Infamy, there's a guy named Roger Gastman who is just an incredible connector. And
Okay.
he, in the
Yeah.
world of graffiti, he founded this thing called Beyond the Streets that you probably saw in Los Angeles, a gallery, but also like he's put on like the largest graffiti art shows, like exhibits, I think, in history in America. Like
Hmm.
it's just massive, like multi-story, like graffiti presentations, but graffiti art inspired by graffiti.
Right.
Like
Yes.
in other words, trying to make a living life for people who are just not just, but who are brilliant graffiti artists to say, you can also make art and sell it. And Roger is this conduit between that. But long story short, Roger was the guy who knew most of the, viable graffiti writers. And there was this opportunity to get some funding to do a graffiti film. And Roger was like, well, if you're going to do it, you got to do it right. And if you're going to do it, I
Of
was like, well,
course.
let's tell like 6 or 7 stories. I don't want to just do one of those group films where there's like 100 characters.
Hmm.
I was at that time, I was kind of, because the Scratch was like that, even Hype was like that. I was like, no, I want to get to know people better
Hmm.
in the course of a movie. And I'd also seen this movie, not Wild Style, Style Wars, which
Hmm.
is there's two seminal early graffiti films, Wild Style and Style Wars, and they're just amazing if you're into that culture. It's just fun to watch them. But in Style Wars, there's this one interview in the kitchen, and the mom was there. And this kid is just like a writer. I mean, he's like writing trains and bombing trains and everything else. And his mom was in the kitchen, and I just loved the scene because it's like the tension was right there. So I told Roger, I was like, let's like work with like 6 or 7 people, and his big thing was, no, they're gonna have to have their face covered because these guys are
Right.
like notorious, legendary, notorious, just infamous. That's where the word came from. And I was like, no, gotta see their face. They gotta see their face. It's like when people wear dark glasses in my interviews, I'm always like,
Well, I remember
do you mind? Do you mind taking them off?
there's one guy in the movie whose face is totally covered and who has glasses, and
Yeah,
you
well,
just
there's
see his
people
mouth
in
with a
that.
little bit of a mustache poking
There are
through.
side interviews, like
Right.
short interviews with people who absolutely, like, we had to do silhouette or they had to have bandanas. And those are guys who are like, no fucking way am I going to take no way am I showing my face because we're going to say their tag, we're going to say their name, their moniker or whatever. And anyway, long story short, and Roger agreed. And so, we've got some people from the East Coast, we've got some people from the West Coast, like San Francisco, LA, I'm sure we missed some cities.
Of
We got a
course.
train writer, this guy Jace, who's like,
Hmm.
had
He's
hit
at
like,
the kind of at the end of the film.
yeah, tens of
Yeah.
thousands of trains in his life. And, you still see his tag going by at the intersection. And, and this woman, Claw, who's like really, really well known now and
Hmm.
has kind of her little logo type thing. from New York City, and this guy NM from Philadelphia, and they have a totally different style. So it was kind of like an exploration of just like into the minds of 6 notorious graffiti writers. And then the 7th character was this guy named Joe Conley, the graffiti gorilla, and he's a
Yes.
buffer. And he's I can't say he's loved by the graffiti writers, but there's a respect because he's so
He's so diligent.
yeah, well, you saw the film. I don't know how to describe Joe, but he's an important part of the film.
Yeah. No,
He goes around buffing everybody in LA, and it's like
right.
cleaning up his neighborhood.
Do you know, did the city of LA ever hire him? I was thinking like he's doing this on
No,
his own.
because he's too controversial. He's like vigilante. That's the word.
Right.
He's like a vigilante buffer. Like he'll just do it his way, and he's just like, I don't know why the city does this so badly. I can do it in 2 minutes.
Right.
But it takes them like 5 days and costs us taxpayers money.
I'm just saying they could pay him a good salary and save money and be happier with the results.
Totally. I could talk about Infamy all day. I'm proud of that one because it's so street, and even our filming was illegal, so there was a bit of danger in it. It was just kind of, I don't say that in a cute way, like, oh, I just learned so much, and it was just me and Roger. It was usually me shooting. Roger was helping with some of the interviews. He was the producer, I was the director, and I was the director and shooter. And that was the first film that Lasse Jarvi, who's a brilliant documentary editor, that he ever cut.
So I assume because Roger was there, you weren't really met with a lot of resistance because people
exactly. That's what I was trying to say. Like I couldn't have gotten one word out of these guys, nor would they have respected me. It didn't matter what I'd done in the past, because it's a very tough community. It's not an easy community. It is not oh cool, yeah, we want to sell our art. They're not selling their art. They're tagging.
Right.
And
they are breaking the law, and they're absolutely and fully aware of that fact.
And they're legendary amongst their community.
Right.
And you have to ask why, but that's what the film is about. So if anybody's listening to this and curious, check it out. And I'll just go right ahead and say the whole thing is on YouTube. It's been bootlegged 1 million times, and it's definitely watchable. But I'm really proud of it because whenever I look back and I go, man, I miss those days when I was younger myself, quite a bit younger, and just running around with a little camera. And it was just, there was no fancy setup. It wasn't film. We weren't paying a lot of money, just running around with those guys and with Roger. But I owe it all to Roger. If it weren't for Roger and Kevin, the producer, seriously, it's like you got to have somebody like that on every project.
Okay, well, let's move forward. I realize I'm just kind of going chronologically through your films.
Okay.
And that actually was not my intention. But I really wanted to talk about those 3 in particular because of
they were all subculture films.
They're all subculture films, and I love that. But the film you made after that is maybe my favorite of all of your films.
Surfwise?
And yes, and is actually one of my favorite documentaries of all time.
Oh, wow.
And that is Surfwise. And maybe it's because of my own upbringing and my own chaotic hippie childhood, and I've probably watched that film 6 times, and I find it absolutely fascinating. It's one of those stories you're like, what? It's a fascinating story, and I'll just say for anybody who's listening or watching on YouTube, seek it out and watch it. Based on my recommendation, because I know what I'm talking about.
Did you grow up in a family? I now want to ask you a couple of questions.
Okay.
Were you in a family that was sort of alternative lifestyles?
Very. Yeah, my father was a member of the I don't know if you've ever heard of the Diggers from San Francisco in the late 60s. Peter Coyote was one of the original members. Peter Coyote actually pierced my ear in a commune up in Northern California when I was 9 years old. I dropped out of school in 2nd grade and didn't go back until 7th. Lived in a lot of communal environments.
So you were sort of homeschooled as well, where you were?
Not really. No, no. But we had no TV. The entire 8 years that I spent, or 7 years I spent with my father between the ages of 8 and 15, we had no TV. I had no schooling.
That's fast.
3 of those years I lived with no electricity. For the better part of a year, not even running water. So I was basically a kid smoking pot, building tree forts, and reading, because what else is there? And the fact is I was reading whatever was around, which is what my father was reading. So
how interesting.
When I finally went back into 7th grade, I had to take a placement exam and I scored a second-year college reading level based on what I was supposed to be comprehending. So, I guess that's not a screaming endorsement for the public education system in America.
Not really, but it's also it's not putting down your experience either.
No.
What, for anybody watching, like, the film in a nutshell is about a family whose father is determined to raise his kids in the wild, literally, he says it, like wild animals, like eating only what human beings should actually eat, like, raw foods and like just like very little food. And he's a doctor, Doc Paskowitz, his 9 kids, they surfing. It's all about surfing. So it's both the health side and the surfing side. And the film is kind of like a courtroom proceeding in a way. I mean, it's a very dynamic film because the characters in that family are fabulous. They're just, to a name, absolutely fascinating, lovable. To this day, I love them. I'm like practically became a member of the family, and so I got so close with them. But they're also troubled by the fact that their dad had this intense regimen. And so the film is sort of one of these, we had the greatest childhood of all time, and everybody watching is sort of jealous, going, God, I wish I'd been brought up like that's so cool. Surfing every day, eating the right foods, just being healthy and like as together as a clan, like the Wolf Clan.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, it's like, yeah, but none of us could get into college.
And there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of
anger, a lot of bitterness. And the film explores that and sort of started out as being this like tribute to this incredible, very well-known surfing family. By the way, the Paskowitzes are, I mean, maybe the generations are changing now, but for a good 30 years, there's no way any surfer in the world wouldn't have heard of Doc Paskowitz. Like, they were like the first family of surfing. And kind of like the Partridge Family or something. Like, they're just 9 kids and one girl, of course, and
they all lived in a bus together.
And they lived in a camper, camper vans and all over the place. That
it's crazy. Okay, so did you suddenly find yourself, speaking of subcultures, did you sort of get an entree into surfer culture, and then
totally
that story and those people came in? Because I had never heard of them, but I was also never a surfer.
I was never a surfer, still am not, although Moses Paskowitz did get me on a surfboard the size of like a raft.
Okay.
And I stood up for like 30 seconds, so I can say I've been surfing. Honestly, it was sort of a rebellion against my first 3 films. I was tired of these community movies where there's not one character. Remember I was saying about Infamy? Yeah. Well, this was even more like, oh, this is one story. I'm going to tell the story of a family. And I knew from the people who approached me, Matt Weaver and a couple other people who approached me to do this film. Jonathan Paskowitz was one guy, and Steve Nemeth and all, whatever. But there was a group of people who wanted to do a Paskowitz film, and they were huge fans of actually Hype. Like going back to my first film, they were like big fans. And I don't know if they had a connection to somebody in Hype or whatever, but they knew the movie really well. And I just was like, this is interesting. I thought it was going to be more like a glowing tribute to Doc's way of life. And, tribute films are nice, but there's always the question of like, but where's the conflict? What's the drama? Like, drama is conflict. So where's the rub? Like, there must be some bad part of this, right? And I honestly was a little naive about it. Like, I think I'd gotten the idea that maybe there was some tension in the family and that I'd find out about it once the interview started. And the very first interview was with the eldest. And if you've seen the film a few times, David Paskowitz. And we're in his room, and he's like, I'm not going to spoil for anybody, but he just kind of unloads in his own intense way on this upbringing that they had. Like, unloads in a way that you just go, holy shit, have I ever stepped into a story?
Yeah.
Oh my God. It was one of the greatest moments in my life. And I mean professionally, because as a documentarian, you always want the curveball.
You got out of the gate.
Yeah, right out of the gate. I remember walking out onto the lawn and talking to Steph Smith, who was our producer, and just saying, I think we got a film here. I was just like stunned. I could hardly talk. It was so emotional and such an outpouring. Like, is it like he'd been just waiting for a camera to just say, here's what's really fucking going on. But he also talked about how great it was.
Yes.
Like, it was every color of the spectrum was in that interview. And I hardly had to try. And then I did the next interview, and the next sibling was just as brilliant and just as pained. And they would just like emote about what a great childhood they had. And it's a really good story. It really is. And Doc is kind of crazy too. And Doc is equally yin yang. Like he's equal parts brilliant, and he's right, by the way, about how we should live. He's
Yes.
100% right.
But he was
And he's also just kind of
rigid, and
nuts.
he was
Yeah.
militant about all
He
of
was
it too.
militant. I'm telling you, Daniel, to this day, it's so fascinating, your background, because everybody brings their background, their childhood story to the film. Like I've had people who were homeschooled who've said like, God, I love that guy. He is so right on. And I've had other people say like, that guy's just disgusting. I can't believe you would even do a movie about him. Like that's just like disgusting. I mean, that's what I like about film. I guess you could say that about books or anything, but it's just when people always bring their lives to every situation. And I feel like the more open a doc is, because we didn't land on one side or the other. I guess we landed a little bit on the side of was like, yeah, still was more worth it than not. I think I could say that without spoiling any kind of an ending. But it also, you can really have different feelings about that. It gets a lot of strong feelings out of people.
And I felt the full range because I identified with my own life.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why I find it so fascinating is because I'm like, yeah, but also, yeah, it's like both ends. Like I do appreciate so many aspects of my absolutely chaotic childhood.
It's really fascinating.
And I spent years and years in therapy working through all the anger and resentment around all of it as well. Because in my case, what I experienced was a great deal of neglect. I want to fast forward past a whole bunch of stuff because I've seen Art and Copy. I've seen Love Lizzo just recently on HBO, which is a very different kind of film. But I was particularly interested in the series you did for TCM, The Power of Film. And I know you're not listed as the director on that, but you're, I think, a producer and an editor.
It really was the director. Laura would be the first to tell you that we co-directed that. Yeah. There was a union credit issue and you can't have co-directors. And so we both just absolutely co-directed that.
Okay.
And, Laura Gabbard, it was a great partner on that.
So Laura Gabbard and you went to school together. Is that correct?
We were both in the same program. We're at the UCLA Producers Program. I think she's 5 or more years behind me, but we both were TAs for this guy, Professor Howard Suber, who really taught me more about film probably than anybody when I was at film school. So when I made Height, some of his lessons were there, and some of that stuff came through. Kind of like this idea of the classic story. What is a classic story? What do people relate to? And he's just a great professor of storytelling. And I was his TA, very close to him. She was a TA also. And he taught at UCLA. He's kind of legendary. Like a lot of filmmakers studied under Howard. He taught there for over 50 years, which is a lot.
Which is amazing.
And he'd always wanted to do kind of like a Bill Moyers type thing or a Joseph Campbell type. He's like a Joseph Campbell type guy. And it's not a long story, except it took 8 years to make. But about 8 years ago, or now 10, Laura and we went to dinner at his house with a bunch of other students, and he was just going on and on about how he just can't get this off the ground, and all these students have tried to help him, and it just keeps falling apart, and whatever. And he wasn't bitter. He was just, and Laura and I were just like, let's just do this. Let's figure this out. And so we had another partner for a little while, but it took a couple of years to do some tests. We ended up just like doing this down and dirty thing that I think was the right move, where we just got this professor who's again, he's like a Yoda-like. He's smart and he's really good at talking about film and breaking it down. And he's really good at narrating films. Like when a scene is playing, he'll say like, now watch what happens. And like, he just like, he's good at not interrupting the scene. And yet you get it. And you're like, oh shit, I never saw that. Like he'll take some big scene from The Godfather and just break it down in a way you've never realized how incredibly mythic it is. And just all these things. They're like, oh, of course everybody relates to this and loves Michael now because of this. And he's really good at that. And so we filmed them for 6 days on a soundstage, basically putting together 50 years of his best lectures about films. And they're always about a film. Like, okay, now we're going to talk about Shawshank Redemption or whatever. And then spent just years cutting it together, trying to cut it all together. And we finally finished, and now it's on TCM, and because it's on TCM, it's on Max, which so we were thrilled. It has a very happy ending, that story. Like a labor of love, no money. Like nobody was paid anything on that. And it made it. Like we got it out Yeah, I'm happy about that because too many projects don't end like that.
Sorry for the interruption, but we need to take a quick break for the sponsor of this episode.
This episode is brought to you by Bunny Smut. Are you sick of the Trump administration trying to gut our democracy and turn our country into a dictatorship? Are you disgusted with all the corruption, with the ICE raids against our citizens? Do you agree with the idea of no kings? If so, then Bunny Smut is what you're looking for. T-shirts that scream loudly no to MAGA and no to Trump. We're fighting against Trumpism and autocracy one T-shirt at a time. BunnySmut.com.
So I love film. I love documentaries, and I really love documentaries on film. Movies about movies. You know, like I don't know if you're familiar with Mark Cousins' work, but he does
Not
all
so
these,
much,
he
actually.
has all these documentaries about film, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the power of film, it feels like you're sitting there in classroom with Howard Suber, who's like, oh, I get to sit in on his class and hear him talk.
And yet
about
it's kind of like he's not that academic. He's super academic. He's saying deep content. He talks about going back to the Greeks, and he talks about, you know, I mean, he ties it all into history and philosophy.
When did he retire from UCLA? After 50 years of teaching?
Well, he kind of was professor emeritus for a little while, you know, for some years. So maybe officially 8 years ago.
Okay.
Something like that.
And this idea of doing this series was initially his?
Well, it's just something he wanted to do, and he's our mentor, and we love the guy. And also, he's taught me all the best lessons about storytelling that I've ever learned. I mean, I've had other teachers I adore and learned a lot from, but he's one of the key mentors in my life. And it was just one of these, honestly, you know, the expression labor of love. Literally, like, we love the guy, and he wanted to do this series, and we're like, let's just do it. It'll be like going back to film school for us. We'll learn everything again. So now I'm like much more of a master of those ideas than I was 10 years ago, because I got to hear them all again 100 times over, editing it.
It's kind of a great experience, and Howard was very moved that we did it.
And like I was saying, it kind of worked. It's one of those labor of love projects where you just like, there's no money. We're just going to keep chipping away at this. I would like get to a point where I feel so guilty. I'd be like, oh my God, I got to edit for like a couple of weeks on the Super project. And I would jump back into it, and Laura would stay involved. You know, we had some good helpers on that one too, but basically with Laura and I, we just kept the faith. We were just like, let's just do this. And then all of a sudden we had 6 episodes, and we showed them to TCM, the head of TCM, Turner Classic Movies. And he was like, this is exactly what we're all about. You know, because I mean, it's about the last century of American movies and kind of what makes the greatest movies of all time work. And it is only American movies, very American. But that doesn't really bother me. I love, you know, all the French cinema and everything else. But like, why is The Godfather still #1 on everybody's list? Or at least, I think it probably still is, if it's not 2 or 3.
It's certainly the top of,
you know,
every list.
And he unpacks that.
And the way you said the way that you shot it, he spoke specifically about one movie at a time, and then you had to sort of deconstruct everything and kind of put it in a different form.
Yeah, like he'd treat it like a lecture, like he would have an umbrella topic, like heroes and villains.
Right.
It sounds really simple, black and white, right? And he's just, and then he'll break down, well, what really is a hero? Why are heroes boring and villains so fascinating? Why do we love villains, but actually we root for the hero? And it's just all these kind of paradoxes, and he'll just bring in every movie you can think of. This, like, you know, he'll go from some Jack Nicholson 70s film, you know, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, to, you know, to Moonlight or Moonstruck. I mean, it could be, you know, any era from the last 100 years was fair game. He's talking about The Wizard of Oz, and he's literally talking about movies that just came out. But only if they were, in his words, popular and memorable. They can't be just box office hits, because those die within a year, and nobody remembers them sometimes. And it can't be just this really memorable movie that never really got a big audience, like just some really cool underground thing. He's only interested in the most popular and memorable, lasting films of all time, like things you're still talking about 20, 30 years later.
Did he ever make any movies himself?
No, he's a teacher. I mean,
Okay.
he wrote some screenplays and things. I want to ask you a question about music, though. Do you ever sit back and wonder why some bands who are like just amazing not one hit wonders, but like massive bands from the 70s or 80s or whatever, how come some of them have lasting power and some of them don't, even if they had the same amount of hits in an era? Because I was just thinking he's all about that with film, and I could talk about that with film all day long, but I've never like applied that lens to music and said, well, certain bands from my childhood, they play really well now, and others are just like, oh Jesus, I can't believe I love that so much.
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. I think there's just dumb luck. Sometimes things hit, sometimes things don't.
Yeah.
But I mean, you just kind of said it in your question in a sense. You go back and listen to it now and you're kind of like, oh boy, like some things just, they don't age well,
Yeah, but wouldn't it be interesting
like if you listen to early, granted the band still has resonance, but like if you listen to early U2 versus early Cars, okay? I think the first record by the Cars is still to this day one of the greatest records of all time. It's absolutely timeless. It's every bit as good now as it was when it was first made. If I listen to U2's first record, boy, and I was never that big of a U2 fan anyway, but that record sounds really, really dated now. But at the time, it sounded incredibly fresh and dynamic and new. So you never know, like historically.
I've gone the other way on those two.
Really?
I would have the album Boy to me was just so groundbreakingly different, just different.
Sure. But
it wasn't even new wave. It wasn't like,
nope.
It was just, yeah.
But in retrospect, it sounds dated to me now,
Yeah. I even go back to 70s bands and I go like, I'm old enough to have had a whole progressive rock era in my life, and like
me too.
I mean, like sometimes I listen to Yes,
sure,
of all bands, and I go, they're still amazing. Like that's an incredible song I'm listening to right now. That's just incredible. And then I'll listen to other stuff from that era and go, just Jesus Christ, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. What were they thinking? Not like I like the lyrics of Yes, they're horrible, but like just the sound, just the musicality, it was like so good.
Yeah,
to me.
Yeah,
I was a fan.
Yeah. Me too.
I was a fan when I was 12.
I mean, being into prog rock, if you're a Seattle rock guy, is like patently unhip.
Unless you talk to Kurt Bloch, he loves that shit.
And I don't give a shit like what people think about what I like and what I don't like. I'll go out on a limb and say I probably have some of the most diverse tastes in music of any of the people from that whole Seattle music scene. Like if you go through my collection, you're going to find such an insanely vast variety. It'll probably confuse most people.
Yeah.
And I might say the same for film, for that matter. I like experimental film. I like weird European art film. I like a lot of mainstream film, Yeah,
me too. I'm pretty diverse. I can cry at some really mainstream thing and just go nuts over some old 50s black and white Bergman film or something. I mean, it's
right.
But the funny thing is like, this day of like, what's the word when Spotify is trying to figure you out or
the algorithm?
Yeah, when they're trying to figure you out. And I always laugh because I'm like, dude, I don't care how good your AI is. You're not going to figure me out. Because I'll listen to, especially if I'm making a doc about a particular artist, I'll listen to them I'll listen to hundreds and hundreds of plays of their music. So I get it and I understand what's going on. And then, and then I'll just stop. I'll never hear that again.
So confuse the robots.
So and then I'll listen to classical or jazz.
I'll always say I'll listen to Charlie Mingus next to Throbbing Gristle, next to Here She Comes by the Laws, next to King Crimson in the same sitting. And I enjoy it all. So let's just real quickly touch on the last film you did, which I don't think has been properly released yet, or has it? Louder Than Guns?
It has not at all. No.
Okay.
If you're talking about Louder Than Guns.
Louder Than Guns, yes, correct.
It's interesting because I've really never done a political film. I've done short advocacy work for certain causes that I'm really proud of. Like I've done 5-minute films for, there was a huge battle against factory farming up in this place where I'm at right now up in northern Wisconsin. And I made a bunch of films for that. I love doing political stuff, but I've always admired people who just have the courage or the audacity to just like do kind of hardcore advocacy films. I've never
Hmm.
done that. But I'm deeply moved by a lot of subjects and gun violence and the inability of America to have a healthy conversation about guns
Yeah.
and gun use when the fact is it's across all spectrums and it affects every single human in this country. I know so many liberals who own guns, and there's a lot of conservatives who you think like are very, very pro gun, and they're actually really very, very into the idea of regulation. And like the stereotypes quickly fade when you start actually talking to human beings about
Hmm.
gun ownership and about
Hmm.
gun rights and about gun violence. And so, long story short, David Green is a voice who's been on NPR for years. He was the voice of Morning Edition news and other things. He's done a lot of reporting for NPR, and he's not with NPR at the moment, although he kind of is. He's a public radio voice, but he now has a show called Left, Right, and Center
Yep. I know it.
that plays in many different markets. And he's the center. And all of his work has always been interested in bridging the gap between political poles, which that show attempts to do and does at times very successfully. And basically, Louder Than Guns is a music film about gun rights and gun violence in America. And the reason it's a music film is because Catch Seeker. So, you know this band, this bluegrass band called Old Crow Medicine Show?
Yeah.
They're out of Nashville, and they have a kind of a cult-like following. They have a huge following. They're one of those bands who plays all the time. They tour all the time. They have a beautiful following. They play to a lot of crowds that are, as Catch says, when I look out on the front row, I see people like he sees hippies, he sees MAGA hats, he sees he sees the entire range of political views, and they're all dancing and singing to his music. And he's just like, if they can come together at my shows, why the hell can't they come together for American children? And so, so long story short, the whole movie it was inspired by this tragic shooting at the Covenant School in Nashville a couple of years ago, where 3 teachers and 3 children were shot dead. And Ketch knew that community was very close to it, and it really affected him. He's like, we just got to do something. Country music has to do something about this issue. And he's like, I want other people who are more famous than me to do something about it. So anyway, David and Ketch and I came up with the idea to do a film. It's going to be a short film first, where we follow the band and go into different communities in different cities where the band is playing, rural, urban, wherever, and talk to literally citizens, like American citizens, about guns. Not politicians, not advocates, just people. And the range of opinions that we heard were just really wide. And the only other thing we did is back to that theme of listening. It's like, listen, be respectful. Even if you think you totally disagree with the person on the other side of the table, this is a space for trying to figure out how to talk about guns. So the movie is kind of it's sort of a demonstration of what that conversation sounds like. The movie doesn't end, and you don't have like a website, like go to this website, sign this bill, we're anti-gun, we're pro this, we're none of that. It's not NRA, it's not anti-gun. It's literally like
it's a
how to
conversation.
talk about it. Because we feel like that's the most important step to maybe doing something about this incredible problem.
And through this process, do you think some people were brought closer to each other, at least in their ability to listen to each other?
I think so. If you watch the film, and we're trying to get it out there right now, I think the response people have had is like, wow, I think it's okay to talk to my neighbor about this. I think it's okay to talk to my brother-in-law who has all these guns and I hate guns, or like
I
vice
think we
versa.
have to. I mean, that's the problem with
We
America
can't be
right
so
now.
polar, because what happens right now is the subject gun comes up and everybody immediately runs to their corner. I'm against guns, ban everything. Or they go to their corner like Second Amendment, like we can have bazookas in our house. It's insane. There's no logic to either of those polls. 80% of Americans are like, I want to do something about this. I don't want kids getting shot. I want to go to the mall and not feel scared. It's crazy.
I also think 80% of Americans don't actually own guns at all. And
it's hard to say, but a lot of people do. But yeah.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, a lot of people don't, for sure.
Well, I'm glad you made the movie, and I hope it comes out. And I think it's going to be an important movie. It's kind of a weird time politically for a movie like this to come out.
It's very, very difficult, because just with the word gun in the title, people are like, oh man, to be totally honest, I mean, the industry is kind of like, it's not a good time for a political film.
Right.
Like, you don't understand. It's not that political. We're not Trump. We're not anti-Trump. I mean, we have our personal beliefs. Believe me, I have I have a full range of personal beliefs. But I'm just saying the film itself is intended
You don't have an agenda that is undergirding the film.
in the film at all. That's right. So anyway, it's an experiment, and we want to use the film as a tool. It's very different from my past films, although there is music. We do let the band play, like there's music throughout it, and you get to see them live. So it's fun in that way. It's like, that's the break. Like, you have these intense conversations, and then you get to like land in a performance, and they're an amazing band.
I'll make sure to put a link in the show notes to where people can watch it. And in the meantime,
Great.
I hope somebody picks it up, and I hope it.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And
No, I'm psyched about it. It's a challenge getting it out there, but I know we will.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're kind of out of time.
Okay.
So thank you so much for your time. It's been great talking to you.
Thanks for your interest. Appreciate it. I mean, it's rare to kind of, first of all, be talking to somebody who's seen a bunch of my work. I don't get to do that much. I appreciate the conversation.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Creative Asylum. A quick favor before you go. If you liked this conversation, please be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every Tuesday at 10. You can find us on Instagram and on YouTube at Creative Asylum CA. That's Creative Asylum and the letters CA. Our website is thecapod.com, and our Facebook is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. Until next week, when we'll have a new conversation with another creative disruptor, stay creative in life and at work.